everyone, welcome to today's session. My name's Cara Wayland Larty, although it says communication support at the bottom, but my name's Cara. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm joined today by Grace Ward and Sophia Zindul, and we'll do introductions in just a moment. But yeah, we've been working on this project with Youth Access that we're really excited to present to everyone today. We've been working on developing some principles for youth-led social action. So activism, campaign and change-making spaces where young people can. We are here today to launch these guiding principles for youth-led social action. And this is a resource designed in collaboration with several different organisations, so some youth access members and some specialist organisations that are working with young people from specific communities and that are typically marginalised or left out of change-making spaces, so that we could make sure that what we're developing is really inclusive. And then we work with young people to actually write these principles themselves. I did just want to acknowledge today the context that we're all arriving in this morning, because this week has been pretty heavy, and last night especially I think was tense for most of us and a lot of people, for people of colour and Muslim and migrant communities especially. This has not been an easy few days. So I just want to acknowledge that, and that some of us might be a little bit low on energy today. But thank you so much for joining us, and also just to say it makes it even more important that we are coming into a space like this, that we are working to bring our young people into change-making spaces where they can put their energy to positive, progressive causes, and have their voice heard on, for positive impact. So thank you for being part of that. So yeah, we hope this resource is going to be a useful framework to kickstart some conversations at your organisations, and hopefully to help make your change-making spaces not just youth-friendly, but actually genuinely youth-led. So today we'll be talking through the headlines of the principles, but we really want this to be a space that starts a conversation and gets you feeling fired up and ready to take this away into your organisation and actually do something with it. It's not a static resource. It is something for collaboration. That's you taking it away and collaborating with young people on it, but also to collaborate with us, tell us what's missing, tell us what needs to be in there. So this will be a conversational space. So do ask questions, do pipe up and get involved. So I'm gonna hand over to Sophia just to introduce us basically.
Hi, so my name is Sophia, as Cara mentioned. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm gonna guide you through one of the first activities that we'll do together collectively. If we could just go to the next slide. Let me see. Thank you. Yeah, so this activity is kind of a creative origins task, and essentially what I want you to do for the next minute or so is to think about how you got here today. So we'll discuss this further in like our breakout rooms in a minute, but just think of the reasons as to why and how you are here today. So it could literally be something as, my friend or colleague told me about this launch event and I've turned up today, or it can have a deeper meaning behind it of like you're just passionate about youth work, passionate about youth voice, and there's kind of a longer story behind it as well. So have a think for a few minutes and then we'll share some of these things in our breakout rooms in a second. I guess we can also introduce ourselves through kind of telling our story a little bit, and then we'll get into the presentation. But yeah, as mentioned before, my name's Sophia, use she, her pronouns, and kind of the reason why I'm here today, or how did I get here today, is I think from a very young age, or around 18, I started working with young people and like on social action projects with different organisations. And at the time, I didn't really know the limitations of those projects, didn't really recognise the ways that maybe all the session plans were pre-planned by someone who's not really thought about youth voice, not really thought, is this what young people want to be doing? Is this actually helpful? and sustainable for the future? Has this got long-term impact? But now, having worked at 42nd Street, which is a mental health charity based in Manchester, it's kind of been a very kind of revolutionary experience for me. They really take young people's voices seriously. They've taken my voice quite seriously as well as a kind of young peer, like lived experience researcher. And it's shown me that maybe some of the places or um, organisations I've worked for before haven't really thought as much about young people as they should have. And yeah, through 42nd Street, I got to meet Cara through a manager, and then I wanted to be involved with the guiding principles. So that is kind of a short but long story as to why I'm here today. Cara or Grace, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Shall I go next and then Grace, you're taking over the next section?
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, my name's Cara, she, her pronouns, and my story of getting here is quite a long one. So I've always worked with young people, and used to manage youth programs, and I've just really always been so inspired by the power that young people have to create change and the appetite that is there for getting involved in community action, social action, volunteering, change making in all different ways. I've worked as a campaigner, and for a long time I was the policy and campaigns manager at Youth Access, where we built up a network of young people trained in their rights called rights advocates to campaign on their rights in the mental health system. So this is where my passion is, and I know that there's so much power that can be tapped into with young people. So yeah, so we did this project at Youth Access to try and develop some of the framework around how you can, yeah, capture some of that power. Grace?
Hi, yeah, so I'm Grace Ward, she, her pronouns, and I'm based in the Young Person's Advisory Service, or YPAS, in Liverpool. My, like, long story short, I started volunteering with YPAS when I was 13, um, and then I got a job. I got employed with them when I was 18, and now I'm 21 and I'm still there, so I've been in YPAS for nearly 10 years. Um, and from my own lived experience, I'm very passionate about young people's rights and their right to participation. And I think these principles really, really help to facilitate that. Um, and yeah, I've known Cara for a few years as well, through campaigns that we worked on together in Youth Access. And I also want to say before we move on, James, I'm very sorry that you got cut off. But if you have anything you want to say, please put it in the chat or the Q&A. And that's me. Shall we move on to the next slide? So we're just going to explain a little bit about why and how we've got here. So as Cara's already said, it's an important political moment, and I think the last month has highlighted that we've had an election, we've had riots, and we've had protests. And young people have a lot at stake in that. The election shows how people can be politically activated, but a lot of young people don't have um, the access to be politically involved. They don't have the vote unless they're 18. And there's opportunities for change there. Sorry, my computer's going off its head. There's opportunities for change for young people to get involved in different ways. And we really, really want to promote that. We want them to be able to have their say and access that right to participation. If they can't, if they can't vote, or if they feel like there are things happening to them, and they're not being involved in being able to have a say, and to change that, and to guide that. So these principles came from consultations with organisations and young people who are youth access members and organisations, working with Black young people, young travellers, young refugees, and trans young people. And then Cara went on from those consultations to the co-production of the principles. So she highlighted the key themes that came out of those consultations and brought them to national group sessions online, which me and Sophia were a part of, to get us to sort of pick out the key denominators of these themes, which have become the principles. And we'll go over them now. So we'll pass on to Sophia. Oh, Cara. It's Cara.
Thanks. And yeah, just to say, we did really try to take a rights-based approach with how we approach developing the principles. So while we were working with youth access members, we also tried to work with some of those specialist organisations working with those particular demographics, so that we knew we were centering those young people that can often be at the margins and making sure we were starting with them rather than thinking about them as an afterthought. So it was really a great experience to be able to hear those voices really loud and clear through this work. So the way that the principles are structured, there's 3 key areas. So the 2 that we initially were thinking that we wanted to understand was around inclusion, making sure that our change-making spaces are really inclusive of young people from all different walks of life, and also impact, making sure that our change-making spaces are obviously great, having an impact on the young people as individuals, but actually that we're having an impact on the issues that we want to be changing. Often I think there's a tension between youth workspaces, youth programs that are about personal development, and actually social action spaces, which are about changing something in the world outside. But then there was this underpinning thing around culture that came through really strongly from the conversations with young people. It was like, the organisation that we're part of has to have this culture of youth leadership. So we added another section to try and encompass that. And there's a lot of overlap between the sections, but that's kind of how we've separated them out. Then there's, underneath each of those key areas, there's key principles. So there's, between 3 and 7 principles per area. And then with each of those principles, we've got points for reflection and action. So we wanted this to be something that you could actually use to go away and think about and think, are we doing that? Can we draw from this example? We've tried to illustrate with some examples and quotes from young people where those existed as well. So I'll start with the first section, which is on culture. So this came through really strongly about a culture of youth leadership. And there's 4 values that we felt really underpin this culture of youth leadership. So obviously the first value is that it's youth-led, and really genuinely youth-led, so really genuinely letting young people lead and supporting young people with the tools they need to do that. So equipping them, resourcing them. The second value is ambitious. So young people were really clear about, like, don't just put us in this box and be like, oh, you can just do this little thing over here. Like, be ambitious, be open, and be ready to, like, change things up. And actually, you'll probably end up with something better than you could have ever thought of without us, because we're that good. But we know our community, right? Like, we know young people. So there's stuff that you wouldn't have thought of that we know, like, implicitly. The third thing was authentic. So creating a culture of honesty, transparency, and genuineness, and that helps to build trust, to avoid tokenism. If you're just open about, well, these are actually the limitations of the project, this is the remit that you'll have, be authentic if it's not the whole world, and show through your actions that young people can be their full selves, make mistakes and own them, ask for help. That really helps to create a sense of authenticity, but also like comfort for young people. And the last value is inclusive. Be inclusive, but be really intentional and proactive about creating spaces that do feel welcoming, non-judgmental, safe, collaborative, and genuinely youth-led. So from this, the sort of actions and reflections that would help to embody that culture around really recognizing young people's value. So not just being like, oh, this is nice to have, or our funder wants us to do some lived experience engagement. Like, no, young people have power, they have expertise, they have contact, they've got connections. You know, there's loads of stuff that they're really valuable for, other than it just being a nice thing to do for them. And from that, really let them lead. And that takes resourcing, that's going to take budget, that's going to take staff time, that's going to take support, for them to actually take on that leadership. Over and over again, we hear, you know, involve us from the start, don't make it tokenistic, involve us from the start and right through to the end as well. So make sure you're acting on our feedback and sort of closing that loop. There was stuff around making sure that staff, you know, that staff are the right staff, that they've got the right values, that they've got the right skills, and actually that young people should be part of the strategy and the recruitment around those staff as well. And where possible, this will be a theme throughout. Employ young people. They're there, they're experts, they're skilled, pay them what they're worth. We've spoke about honesty and transparency, key things to helping young people feel that this is an authentic, you know, space. And finally, just treating young people like individuals, and that's a key part of the inclusion point. Is all young people, you know, there might be commonalities between young people, there might be certain demographics that have more in common, but ultimately everyone's an individual. And we know in our youth access membership, folks take a person-centered approach. That's really important in this, in our activism spaces as well. So moving on to the second area, which was inclusion. Again, there's 4 key principles. The first one being to embrace diversity. Diversity is just a fact. It's there. Our communities are diverse. Every single young person is different. But you kind of can't just say you're diverse and inclusive. You actually have to take responsibility for that and embrace it. So there's 4 kind of different actions that we have outlined. So there's first action around reducing barriers, so recognizing that all different types of people, young people, will face different barriers in engaging with social action, and you need to kind of make effort to understand what might be standing between young people and your change making spaces. Is it that they can't afford the bus fare? Is it that English isn't their first language? Is it that their parents like don't know who you are and they're not going to let them come? And how can you work to take that barrier away? Recognise diversity within the community. So recognise that young people aren't one homogenous group. Neither are Black young people or trans young people or travellers. There's a lot of nuance within those spaces. So try to, again, understand that and work with the community to understand those differences. And then actively respond to that. So like get out in the community, be where young people are, build partnerships where young people are going to be. So I think one of our members, number 5 in Reading, they spoke about partnering with a football club because it's just where the young people are already. One of the organisations taking part in this, CRAN, the Kent Refugee Action Network, their young ambassadors are employed. They're the best possible connectors into the community. They go and just speak to their mates as mates and are like, hey, do you want to come into CRAN? It feels like we could really help you with that. And they're not seen as a staff member, they're just seen as a mate. So yeah, the last point on embracing diversity was just to make sure those diverse needs are met. So whether it is making sure there's a budget line for those bus fares to make sure that the young people can afford to get in, making sure there's a translator, making sure that you go and speak to parents and show them your safeguarding policy, or, you know, whatever it is that's going to make them feel assured to let their young people join the space. The next point was around addressing inequalities. So again, just really taking that active approach, going beyond passive, that, you know, diversity and inclusion. Our doors are open to everybody. Okay, but there will be some people that are not walking through those doors. Why is that? You need to understand why certain young people might not be engaging with your change making spaces. And linked to that is considering programs by and for that community specifically. So often where young people share an identity or an experience, whether that be young people who are refugees, Black young people, trans young people, the young people we work with at Gendered Intelligence spoke about really the importance of being in that safe space, about campaigning on issues that are linked specifically to their experience. So sometimes a targeted approach is necessary. The next point was around nurturing an inclusive and representative staff team. So again, having a mix of lived experience and learned experience. Young people recognise the value of both of those things, but love to see other young people in the roles because there's just a natural affiliation. But also if folks are from a marginalised community, often they're going to, recognise the value of seeing themselves reflected, having someone that implicitly understands some of the challenges that they're facing, or things that are important to them. So one of the organisations we spoke to that work with Black young people spoke about just the simple things like knowing what food, cultural food would make young people feel really valued at events, and that just being a sort of implicit understanding that left space then to think about the bigger picture and other intersections of maybe marginalisation as well. But that doesn't just sit with staff who are from the community. It needs to be embedded throughout, your values, your management styles, the way that you work, and that responsibility really shared across the team to make sure you are inclusive. Certain skills were seen as important as well for inclusion, so particularly around facilitation, holding spaces that are really intentional, really open and inclusive, and being flexible, being adaptable and ready to change things if it's not working for young people. And lastly was around supporting lived experience. So if you are going to be working with young people, especially young people from marginalised communities or who are going through really difficult experiences, because that's likely to be live at the time, right? It's living experience. You have to be ready to support that. They don't come to work in a vacuum. They don't come to their activism in a vacuum. It's all taking its toll. So training and personal development to make sure that they're actually gaining the skills and building capacity to do that role with confidence and skill, but also recognising the emotional impact of the work and making sure there's support in place for that. Offering support with other external issues as well, but really importantly, just having fun, making space, to be human and to celebrate your achievements and just to have a nice time as well. That's really important in our change making spaces. So next point on impact, Sophia.
Yeah, so the next theme that came across was impact, and that's around how we can ensure, make sure that youth-led action is sustainable, achievable, and kind of contributes to real change in the world. And there was 3 principles that came out of this, with the first one being recognising the power that young people have. So as Cara said before, young people have valuable lived experience as well as learned experience, and they're kind of experts of their own experiences. They'll often have kind of deeper understanding of the issues that they're facing in this moment and in the past, so they can bring a lot of valuable nuances to what is going on at the moment for them and for the people as well. It should be kind of important to listen and advocate for those voices that are often at the margins, and when it comes to having people's voices heard, it's crucial that we kind of go beyond that as well. So young people want to and are really good at co-creating programs, campaigning for social change, and also working with policymakers. So it does have to kind of go beyond just we are here to listen to, so their voice being listened to. There's so many other things that young people can be involved in as well. The next point was about helping us build and use our power. So with this, you can do this by helping young people kind of expand their networks with partners and organisations, so that we can feel like we're part of something much bigger and are taken seriously. That's something that's kind of been, just from a personal example, from the research project that we worked at 42nd Street, it's been sometimes quite hard to get in touch with people and reach out to organisations that would really benefit from the research we've done. And it's often had to be some of the managers and senior staff having to step in and send them a few emails to kind of let them know that this is a really important piece of work. We should be listening to these young adults because you are the ones funding this project. So that is really important as well. And to add to that, young people don't always have access to spaces of people with the most influence of change. So kind of helping them find those organisations or those people that have a lot of influence is really important. And also engaging with new forms of research was one of the things that came out of this point too, of just finding out new ways for doing social action with young people, new ways for doing youth voice, kind of youth-led partnerships, just seeing what works for each organisation, because it'll be different for every young person, be different for every organisation and job, and just kind of testing things, learning things and sharing them with other people as well. And the last principle was about helping young people stay strong. So to have social impact, we need to stay determined, be supportive, and also look after our well-being. So it's very useful to help young people kind of build their resilience, to show them that they're being supported, to kind of, yeah, show them the spaces where they can be supported and appreciated, and also celebrate all the wins, no matter how big or small they are. Because social action is meant to be fun as well, and it can be very fun for young people too. The other thing that came out of this was kind of thinking about long-term impacts of projects and work with young people. How can we make them more sustainable, and how can we ensure that the findings of the research or kind of the new principles that we've found, how are they embedded within your organizations and within your like day-to-day roles for the long-term benefit? So young people, a lot of the time for social action projects, or when they have like a young adult role in organizations, they'll often be on a short-term contract, and it doesn't always guarantee employment in the future. So we as young people, we do want to see how this project carries on beyond our time at the organisation. What are you doing with it? Are you making sure that it's not a tokenistic thing, like Cara said, and it has got like potential future impacts as well, and that it carries on growing from there as well. Yeah, I think that's it for this. I'll pass on to Grace to carry on.
I think it's to me, isn't it, for the discussion?
Oh, sorry.
Great, thank you, Sophia. So we're going to just let everyone sort of process all that information that we've just given you, and just ask a few key questions. So we're going to put you into breakouts in 2s or 3s in just a moment. And the questions that we will ask you just to reflect on are, have you got any initial questions? And then you can bring them back into the group space. Was there anything that stood out for you? Any of the principles that sort of really resonated or brought up a question? Does your organisation already do some of these approaches? Is this kind of your bread and butter? Are you like, yeah, I feel like we're ticking a lot of boxes? Is there anything that you actually hadn't considered before? So just have a chat about what the initial presentations brought up for you. We'll give you a few minutes in the breakout rooms, and then ask you to sort of, well, we'll just open the floor for discussion. So it'd be good to hear back from a couple of groups. Was there any questions, I guess? I can see in the Q&A there's a couple of things, but does anyone want to ask a question? You can use the raise hand function so I can spot you. Questions or comments or feedback from the groups around what stood out? Angela?
Yeah, hello. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting, and it did bring up quite a lot of thoughts, not so much questions, but sort of more about the underlying principles and how we can improve with taking that to the young people. What we were discussing in our little group as well is how you reach the wider young people and how we sort of reduce those barriers and actually join together to actually look at the wider issues for young people and what they want, and really the development of young people, the opportunity. I thought that was really so important about valuing, and we were talking about how really how it sits within our organisations and how we can improve it. But I think the main thing for me, what it reignites, because I think we've lost a lot, is actually that this has brought it back to that youth action, which we had at one point, was really building many years ago, and then unfortunately through different circumstances, whether that's government, environmental, or whatever, political, we sort of lost. So it's really nice to see this back quite firmly on the agenda, and how we can build on this lovely framework that you put together. So yeah, I'm super excited to take that back to our organisation, our young people. So thank you.
Can I ask what your organisation is, Angela?
Yeah, we're Croydon Drop-In. We're Youth Information and Guidance in Croydon, and we've got a young people's team that sits in the centre of our organisation. So yeah, it'd be great for them to have this framework to work with.
And I think one of the points that came through as well, I think it is articulated in the principles document, is about why social action is important for young people as well. And it speaks to what you're saying there around, we used to have this, and it's valuable. You want to help young people to develop, but part of that is social action, especially when you're in a therapeutic space like Croydon Drop-In or many youth access members. Actually, sometimes the activist part is a really important part of young people's recovery, or well-being, because they can feel like they're contributing to making change for the next generation. So something that's affected them negatively, that actually they can be part of that change. It's really important for people to feel, humans to feel part of change. I think don't neglect that part of what the power of social action. I'm not sure your name, sorry, but you've got your hand up. Please do first.
Hi, sorry, it's Kate.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had an issue logging on. Hi. So I think I work for an organisation that's a mental health charity. So we kind of offer one counselling, and we've grown as an organisation quite rapidly in the last 3 years. And I think a lot of the principles are kind of mainly common sense, if you think about them in terms of embedding them in your organisation. And I think what's difficult is actually having somebody who oversees that role with kind of the youth groups and the kind of the youth leadership teams, and I think that's where our organisation has kind of struggled, because we've grown so quickly. There wasn't somebody specifically who was going to take on that part, and it's been a little bit of an add-on, which is frustrating. And I think my role's changing in September, and I'm going to hopefully lead those youth groups a little bit more, and hopefully I think have that consistency, because I think it's kind of in some respects been an add-on to lots of other things, which has been frustrating, because it shouldn't really. It should kind of actually be an initial principle, because it is part of what our organisation is in terms of offering mental health support and offering counselling. So it's kind of just re-embedded that we need to kind of have that consistency approach with, meeting with them regularly, obviously getting the right level of support for them if they kind of come to an organisation or stay on when they finish their support, as a kind of youth voice. And so that, hopefully we can kind of embed that a little bit better going forward. I think that's probably the best way, best thing I can take from today, is looking at, we were doing lots of things right, but it was kind of very messy and very bitty. So it was kind of, we want to have that, for young people to come on board and feel feel settled and feel that support. And we've also changed our age group as well since I've worked with the service. We only went up to 17, now we go up to 25, but yet we still haven't extended our age group within our youth voice team. So at the minute we're only up to 18, and obviously we're kind of missing that gap of those kind of 18 to 25-year-olds, which we should really be having. So yeah, so that it's been really helpful to kind of all the principles there. They're all things that are easy enough to implement. My only thing is obviously engagement. We're trying to get those right people on board within the organisation, or we haven't got a very good social media presence. So silly things like that, just getting more young people to improve our social media and to help that with what the message that we're trying to share as an organisation. So yeah, I hope this has been really useful. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And I would encourage you as well to like give this resource to the young people and let them be the judges as well. Grace, you put your hand up, and I wonder if it's to speak about the power of wonderful management.
Yeah, I was going to say, can I just speak to this, because my experience in YPass, it's what you've just described is basically what we do in YPass. And I went to counselling, and then I said I want to stay on in the service, I'm not ready to go yet, but obviously I've done with counselling, and the participation lead came to meet with me after a session, and she told me all about Young Ambassadors, which is our youth voice group, and that's how I started volunteering with the service. That participation lead's now my manager, and I'm part of the participation team, and that I've watched that service just grow. I've watched it go from going to young people after the counselling sessions and saying, come and join, come and have your say about the organisation. And what's so great about the space is we're involved at all levels, so we can talk to senior leadership and we can talk to the trustees, and we run external campaigns and we go out into the city and we talk to other people. But it's about having that say at all levels of the organisation and externally. And that's gone from just one participation lead having her participation group to now she's the participation lead, and she's got young people employed as a participation team running the participation group, and that's how it can develop. Social media wise as well, we as young people create the social media content, so it just takes some pressure off staff members, because obviously counsellors and wellbeing staff don't have the time to be making social media content. So it is just about getting young people to do as much as possible, give them the opportunities. We can put it on the CV. I always say that, like, it's about giving back to them if they're given to you as an organisation, and make sure that they get the most out of it, skills wise and development wise. I think that's been so important for me. I've grown so much in the last 10 years in this organisation. So yeah, I just thought I'd speak to that.
Did any other groups want to feedback? I don't know if anyone from my group wanted to pipe up about what we were talking about. Or any questions?
Yeah, I guess I can go for it. Yeah, so I think we had two conversations going on. Firstly, about the importance of making what we offer young people fun and social for them, and the importance of creating a nice environment, a nice space that they want to be in, as well as them, doing the work and making the change. And I think that that kind of links a lot with what we were talking about in terms of their development, because there's a social side of development as well, and they are growing young people and they need to kind of enjoy it. They're not getting paid for this usually. They are volunteering and we need to value their time. So that was like one thing, and if anyone wants to add on to that, they are welcome to. And then the other one was about just making sure that we embed youth leadership in our processes. So it's around, well, what I do in my youth council in Peterborough is we have a big governance approach where the young people have their own say in who's elected into the youth council, who kind of chairs it, who co-chairs it, who writes the minutes, any kind of decisions they're making, they make them for themselves, and they know that I'm there as a support mechanism. Like, I'm there to kind of like, if they tell me what needs doing, I'll do it. If they need any advice or guidance or support, I'll do that, but I'm working for them. And I think just, moving the power over to them, they really blossom in it. So kind of reflecting on and evaluating where the power lies in groups, and then supporting their skill development to do what they need to do in that as well.
Thanks so much, Maria. I think some of the conversations you were having around young people trying to be embedded into like co-production roles in campaigning at Hope Duplicate to say at Young Minds. And I guess one of my points of feedback from developing the principles is like, just don't underestimate young people. We can hold nice co-production spaces, but then actually, as Grace has said, they can go further with the right tools and structures around. They can actually be leading their own groups. They can be taking responsibility for some quite big stuff. So I guess just really don't underestimate or like preemptively pigeonhole them into like something that you think, oh yeah, this would be nice for young people to do. Let them define that for themselves, or challenge them, push. And the point around fun, I think, stood out for us. And there are stats, like there's stats from the anti-abortion movement in the States, like really strong stats that show actually the strongest factor in middle-aged, middle-class women who kept coming back to these groups wasn't their belief in pro-life. Actually, their beliefs were kind of ambivalent. What kept them coming back was the social side. They liked coming back and meeting their friends. They liked coming back and having cups of tea and, catching up with each other. And that's what kept them back. There's a whole study on it. So just say that is actually really backed up by evidence, as well as young people's voices saying it as well. Any last points or questions before we move on to next steps? So yeah, we don't want this sitting on a shelf in your organisation. So Grace, do you want to talk us through?
Yeah, so there's already been practical steps mentioned, so things like doing research and connecting with other organisations and sharing resources, and making care packages for young people who might take part in research or who might take part in interviews, and reimbursing them for the time. They're all practical things you can do to make the principles a reality. More generally, we've got 4 overarching things that we think everyone can do. The framework of the principles is quite general. It's for you to go and take away and make specific to your organisation. But these 4 things that we want to go over start with taking the pledge. So this means committing to working with young people and making these principles a reality. So you should get a link after this meeting to take the pledge. And that just commits your organisation to saying, we believe in these principles. We want to make them a reality. We're going to share them about and really, really promote them. And that's a good starting point. Then reflecting at where you're at. So join the Youth Access Forum, keep on, sharing knowledge and learning and relearning and, trying to understand new things and new approaches, like we've already said. But I think as well, hold workshops to generate and share ideas with young people, with other members of your organisation, other staff, and other key stakeholders as well. What I've taken from today in the 2 10-minute conversations I've had with my breakout group is I've come away with new ideas already, and that's in 20 minutes, and that I find that quite invigorating and quite exciting. So if you schedule time to just sit down with, your group of young people or with your organisation and just think, what's working, what isn't working, why aren't we meeting this certain aspect of the principles, and keep on reevaluating and having these discussions to start putting things into action. I think that's a good place to start as well. Next slide, please. And then ensuring accountability. So, you know, it's easy to say you're going to do all these things and then, you know, get caught up in whatever else it is that you've got going on in work. I think you need to find and create ways for young people to regularly check and hold your organisation to account. So this could be through a participation group, like the one I've already mentioned in YPath. We find that particularly useful, having that space of young people who meet regularly and have the tools to be able to give not just feedback but criticism and to shape what the organisation is doing. Like Cara said, make sure young people in your organisation know about these principles. Don't let them just become like isolated with professionals. They were made by young people for young people as well, so the document is accessible to them. And then finally, in terms of your working life, we hope that you integrate these principles into all parts of your organisation, and we hope that referring to them becomes common practice. So for that, we hope that, you know, you have them, the summary of the principles, maybe dotted around your office as posters on the wall or as your desktop background, anything like that. Just have them integrated into any, you know, team meetings as like, you know, the three ones, so culture, inclusivity and impact. You know, are we meeting these, what's working, what's not, and just it's just having that constant of the principles there. Because, you know, someone said before, it's almost common sense. So if it's almost common sense, have it there all the time. It makes sense to be there, have it there all the time. So they're the four things we think everyone can do. And then obviously there'll be things tailored to your organisation or where you're at and the context that you're working in. But if we just go to the next slide, this is the last activity for the day. We want you to think about strengths and challenges in your organisation. So based on the overview of the principles that we've given today, what do you think your organisation already do well? And what principles maybe do you think you could be doing a little bit better, or your organisation might need some support? And we hope that in this last 10 minutes we can just share some maybe some ideas on what you could be doing better, or ask other people how do they do this. And yeah, hopefully it can be a bit of a productive space. So we're going to stay in this room, we're not going to go into breakout rooms. Just if anyone wants to raise the hand or use the chat function. Yeah, Rebecca?
Hi, I would say probably inclusion, in the sense of we do a really good job with our youth advisory board in having a lot of young people age range, but just making sure that we're hearing from enough diverse backgrounds. So it works why people can apply to be a member of our youth advisory board, but making sure that it's how we go out into those communities to make sure that we're inclusive enough and hearing from everyone's important voice, and we don't just become kind of like less dynamic in that sense.
Yeah, I get that. And I think change isn't going to happen straight away. Change isn't going to happen overnight in your organisation. I think it's part of you. It's important for your team to reflect on, you know, whether change is happening over time, whether you're seeing that group become more diverse, and if you're not, thinking about, well, how do we go out to those spaces where young people are, because young people aren't always going to come to you, or they might not always know about your service. That's something that we find in YPath, not everyone knows about us. And it's also, like we've said in the diversity section of the principles, asking young people what they want from the space, asking young people what would make them feel more comfortable, maybe holding workshops to find out why they aren't attending the space, and you know, not every young person is going to want to attend a certain space. It might not be for them. But if you can give them the option to attend and to be comfortable in that space, then I think you're doing everything you can. And it's just reflecting on that over time.
Thank you.
In the chat, we've got Katie who said, how do you approach young people once they've finished support, e.g. join the team? What's the most effective? We find young people don't often give feedback or check emails. So let's say about joining a team after we finished support, I just had the participation lead approach me. It's about you going to them, I think, which is important, or having leaflets in the counselling rooms or whatever space it is that they're using. Having counselling and wellbeing staff at the end of support actively saying, okay, well, that's the end of the support, but we've got this opportunity which you might be interested in. Would you like to talk to the participation lead or whoever that is in your service? I don't know if Cara, you wanted to come in on this as well.
Yeah, all good ideas. I think it's that about going to where young people are, and you won't know that unless you ask them. But one of the organisations I spoke to that was working with Black young people, they basically heard from young people, and they heard from young people because their staff are young people that are connected to the young campaigners, so they get that feedback constantly. And they were basically just saying the emails are too much, they're getting too many emails, and they don't open them all the time. That generation, we don't engage with emails in the same way as like a professional who's sitting at the desk all day kind of thing. So they said, "Oh, what's going to work then?" Because we want to make sure that you get the opportunities that we're sending out to you. So what they created instead was like a type form. If you've used Typeform, it's like often what you can make surveys or quizzes on. So you can also use it as a sign-up form. So they would just put out like a weekly or whatever sort of thing of just fill out this survey if you want the information. And then they could sort of put in their email address and then get that week's updates. So it was just a really simple way that young people were like, well, it'd be better if we just had one thing and we could choose whether we get it that week or not. So just those little things, but yeah, the ideas will be sparked by them telling you how their lives are rather than us assuming things based on how we operate. But yeah, if you've got them in a space like a counselling service, there's maybe obvious touch points. But it depends on the structure of your organisation, I guess. I can see another hand up as well.
Yeah, that's Jason. Do you want to come in?
Oh yeah. I mean, one of the things talking about sort of inclusion, I think we've still got a long way to go in Peterborough in terms of kind of building sort of membership and involvement. But one of the changes I've found with sort of care leavers is when we are very clear on the successes and changes that have been made. And I think sort of care leavers are kind of sort of seeing that there are changes. They're very kind of tangible. And there's been sort of interest from people that maybe didn't reach out to us before or we were not connecting with. So I think that's something I've noticed, that when they can see those very sort of tangible changes, they can see about why and what the benefits are of being involved.
I think, yeah, it is. It's about young people being able to see that things are actually happening. One of the things we highlight in the principles as well is that sometimes change doesn't happen. Sometimes things can't be done and the service doesn't have the resources to do certain things. And it's about being honest and transparent with young people rather than, you know, brushing past it and moving on and pretending something didn't happen. About going back to them and saying, look, we've gone to senior leadership, or look, we've gone to the council and this just can't happen right now, and then working with them to find an alternative. I think so my colleague Dean, he said young people know when you're not being authentic, they know when you're not bringing your true self to a space, and if you're not being honest with them about something that they really care about and are invested in, then that's going to put them off the service. So it's not just about, I think, them seeing change happen or being able to evidence and close the feedback loop in that way. I think it's also closing the feedback loop and coming back and being transparent with them and just saying, look, this can't happen. Should we try and find another way of doing it?
It's what you hear again and again in, lived experience spaces is like, we just don't know what happened we dredged up all this trauma and shared it, hoping that change would happen. And then it felt like nothing did happen, or we don't know. And, when you're a policy expert on the other side, knowing that these things take time, or, that this policymaker is engaging, but in this behind the scenes way or whatever, that doesn't always get translated back to the community that fed in. And that can feel really disheartening. So it's just about considering that journey for people, and managing expectations is really important for the sort of help us stay strong principle. Was like, yeah, managing expectations, making sure we know what the process looks like, and helping us stick with that in the long term, or get feedback in the long term. Sophia, I know this was really something that was important to you because of being on a time limited project. Did you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, so when we at 42nd Street, we did a research project on young people's mental health experiences in Greater Manchester, and came up with recommendations, spoke to loads of people in the NHS, the commissioners, other organisations around Manchester about like what steps they should take. But because it's not mandatory for them to make any of these changes to kind of make people's experiences better in the future, there was a point in the project where I just felt like, well, once we leave the organisation, which is the end of September, how do we actually know something's going to come out of this? Because we're no longer in control of the project. And even now, it's kind of hard to manage our own expectations with like in meetings and stuff with people sometimes not getting back to us about things, or not really taking the recommendations as seriously as we'd want them to. So it's kind of a hard thing to navigate, but being open and honest about it in the start will help in the long run, because I think there was a build-up of like, this will make changes around like services in Greater Manchester, but obviously it can't happen immediately. There's no kind of guarantee that people will take on these recommendations. It's not like a policy, it's not like a regulation that's put in place. So just kind of making sure it's a sustainable and long-term thing, that someone else does take over the project once we leave, that it's not forgotten about and it's not just a report that sits on a shelf, has been really important to us. And we have like a youth group, like Change Ambassadors, that do social action projects, and they've actually asked to take on this research project and carry on doing stuff on it. So that's been kind of a way for us to make it more sustainable and more kind of have a more of a long-term impact for the future.
Unless there's any final points, questions, I think that we should start to wrap up. But is there any other burning comments that anyone wants to make before we close?
Yeah, I'd just say, like, that's one of the challenges working in what I find is that the young people who will sign up and be part of and engage in it are not always reflective of the young people that you support, and because it takes a certain type of young person to be motivated and engaged and that kind of thing. And I think it's and well, the money's not there, is it? Ultimately, to have the resource and because it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to engage some of the young people that really are affected by our services, and really get really affected by decisions and that kind of stuff, and that's quite a resource intensive thing. And yeah, and I just wonder if there's any way of or tips, I guess, of writing that into our general bids with local authorities and various things, where that becomes a part of, youth empowerment becomes part of everything. Do you know what I mean? Because it's just not accounted for, is it? And so we've got to try and find the money and the hours and the resources to do it from from nowhere really. And what that and we were talking in our breakout group, what that ultimately means is if you do find funding to fund it in a good way, that's always time limited, and and that sets up the young people to because I guess it's that like if you're if they're reliant on funding in your organization that's going to run out to keep a campaign going, that's not the best thing, is it?
There's ethics around it, right? Like you've got to see it as an ethical and a safeguarding thing of engaging with anyone with lived experience. Is like they're on the coal face of this, and that is hard. And I think that's a bigger question as well in terms of where it is useful for people on their journey. Like if they are in the middle of it right now, is that the right time for them to be engaging in activism? If actually what they need is advocacy, advice, information, counselling, whatever, maybe it's at a different point in their journey that they engage with, the activism. And I would recommend that that's part of that ethical consideration of making sure that we are speaking to people who do know what it's like, but maybe like at that point, that's not the time for them. But I will encourage you, James, this is a great segue into closing the session, to take that into the forum, because people are going to have thoughts on that, I think, in this community, especially with Youth Access members who are working with young people in crisis a lot of the time. I would recommend that you take that question into the forum, and we can talk and we can bounce ideas. This is what this community is for, right? So yeah, I'm going to just... sorry, I'm just going to have to close the session, James, I'm afraid. Sorry, but please take it into the chat, into the forum space. I've just put those 3 links in the chat again. So read the principles in full. They're great. These young people put their hearts and souls into this, and they really come from, a passionate place, but also something really useful, we hope. Please take the pledge. The pledge is just to say we commit to trying to implement these. You don't have to be perfect just yet. We just want to see that there's folks committed to putting the effort into making it happen. And there's some lovely stickers and graphics and things that you can share or put on your website to say, look, we're trying with this, and you can hold us to account. And join the forum. So please do continue this conversation. There's loads coming out already. So really want to encourage you to continue that conversation. But we'll have to wrap up today. I want to respect people's time and mornings. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Grace. Thank you, Sophia, for being part of it and for hosting today. And thanks, Youth Access, for having us.